Well, we're finding out things that we didn't know 2.5 years ago. This little tale started at the beginning of the COVID crisis, and it started with the immense powers under the Biosecurity Act, which left the Health Minister, Greg Hunt, with the capacity to largely close down economies, shut borders, enact all sorts of things, even call out martial power. Now, when the Biosecurity Act was looked at both by Greg Hunt, then Prime Minister Scott Morrison, they decided that there needed to be some safeguards. There was also view that if Greg Hunt was incapacitated by COVID himself, those powers, his powers, would be then delegated to the junior minister, Richard Colbeck. It's quite clear that Scott Morrison and Greg Hunt didn't want that to happen, so they decided, along with Christian Porter, then Attorney General, to look at how they could delegate those powers, or at least have some greater safeguard. They came up with an administrative instrument which allowed, by the stroke of a pen, Scott Morrison to become Health Minister, as well as Greg Hunt. We didn't know about this until the weekend, when there was a report in The Australian by Simon Benson and Jeff Chambers, who have got a book about Scott Morrison's time during the COVID period. But this is quite remarkable, because while Greg Hunt was, he agreed with the state of play and said that there need to be some greater oversight, other powers were delegated without them being told. Finance Minister Matthias Cormann, I understand, was not told that his position as Finance Minister was not a position he held solely, that Scott Morrison was also Finance Minister. Matthias Cormann didn't know this, I understand, but this little story continued when it became clear that internally there was a spat over the PET 11 gas project, an offshore gas project in New South Wales, where it appears that the government was split as to whether the gas project should go ahead or whether it should be stopped. And Scott Morrison, it seems, had learned from lessons of COVID and decided that he would make himself Resources Minister, as well as Keith Pitt, a Nationals, Queensland Nationals MP. Quite remarkable too. Now, did Keith Pitt know this? Of course he didn't. He didn't know that. And I think you'll pick up in this exchange that I had with Keith Pitt earlier in the day that he was rather concerned. Certainly found it unusual. But as I said, I worked very closely with Scott through a very difficult period through COVID for the whole country and all of the Australian people. Mate, I'm just not going to throw him under a bus. I just won't. But what did you say? Tell us at least what did you say in that meeting when you were informed of this? Well, look, it's clearly something I was concerned about, as you would expect. But as I've said, I look to exercise my job and discharge my job diligently. The particular matter itself is clearly before the courts. I can't make any specific comments around that. As you know, I mean, you've had to look at Lisa Wilkinson to see where that might land you. So I'll always be very cautious and make sure I give the courts due respect.
So, Andrew, what's the current Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, had to say? Well, he's going to be asking for some advice from his own department, the Prime Minister and Prime Minister and Cabinet department. But just going back on what Keith Pitt was talking about there, and my question, to give it the context. There was a meeting that Keith Pitt went to in Scott Morrison's office, I understand, at the very early months of last year. At the meeting was Michael McCormack, then Nationals leader, a few chiefs of staff, the Prime Minister himself, Scott Morrison, his Principal Private Secretary, Jeroen Finkelstein, where they were effectively told where Keith Pitt was told, that is, that his ministerial responsibilities would now be shared by Scott Morrison. Now, Anthony Albanese says that this is in breach of the spirit of Westminster responsibility, that that we should have been told, the nation should have been told, that it was lacking transparency, and he's been quite scathing. Let's listen to Anthony Albanese here.
I've asked the Secretary of the Department of Prime Minister and Cabinet. He'll be seeking advice from appropriate people, including the Solicitor General, about all of these issues. I'll be getting a full briefing this afternoon. This is dripping out like a tap that needs a washer fixed, and what we need is actually to get the full flow of all the information out there, and then we'll make a decision about a way forward here.
Andrew, we heard earlier from Keith Pitt, but what other reaction has there been from Coalition MPs this morning?
Well, we've also heard from the Nationals leader, David Littleproud. Now, of course, anything to do with portfolios has something to do with a coalition agreement that is struck between the Nationals and the Liberals if they're in government. Now, on the face of it, it would appear to be in breach at least of the spirit of that coalition agreement if the Prime Minister suddenly uses this unannounced and secretive power, it seems, to pounce on someone else's portfolio. So we heard from David Littleproud about his concerns this morning.
Well, that's pretty ordinary. As far as I'm concerned, if you have a cabinet government, you trust your cabinet. You create that environment in the cabinet room to have those discussions. Well, it's disappointing. If you want to have a government that you need to trust, you've got to trust one another, and you've got to create that environment for that trust to be aired in a forum such as the cabinet room to work through issues and get to a consensus.
David Littleproud, their Nationals leader, talking about this rather murky episode many months after the end of the Morrison government, a story that now reveals itself as the fact that Scott Morrison wasn't just Prime Minister, he was also Health Minister, he was Finance Minister, and in the dying days of the Morrison government, he was also Resources Minister, which enabled him to kibosh an offshore gas project, which was causing some political heat among his New South Wales brethren. So quite a remarkable story, Ros, and I can guarantee this is not the last we've heard of it.
Andrew, thank you.